Welcome to the HR Book Club. This is the series where we meet the authors behind the very best HR books. I'm delighted to be joined by Patrick Vermeren, and we're going to be discussing his book, A Skeptic's HR Dictionary. Hi, Patrick. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for the
Good.
introduction, Liam.
No worries. Well, that was what I was going to ask you to do. I was going to say, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
It's a little bit difficult, huh? All right, maybe I'll just start with my career as an HR professional. It started back in 1998, I believe, when I was working for a bank, and I was in part trainer, coach, and in part I was working for a competency project. And that's when I started my career as an HR professional. Before that, I was more in management and sales management. Um, so that's how I got into HR, and I've always had this urge to try and be as professional as possible in the jobs I did. So that's when I started studying psychology in the Free University. Yeah, just to make sure that I was actually very professional in what I did.
Okay.
So that's how it all got started, reading into psychology, taking courses, and discovering that a lot of nonsense was told to me during the career, also during the career of HR as an HR professional, um,
Okay.
and that led to my book ultimately.
Right, so that's what kind
Yeah.
of motivated you to write the book. So explain the book then. So what's the book? What does it go through? Who's it aimed at?
Well, of course, the book is aimed at HR professionals, but also at CEOs, because sometimes CEOs, for example, overrule HR professionals because they follow the training, let's say, in Myers-Briggs type indicator, and they're very extroverted, and they recognize themselves in that typology, and then they say, "Wow, this is good," and then they they force the HR department to take this into the curriculum and to have trainings. But uh, and also I meant the book also for employees as a whole to act, in fact, a little bit. The book should act a little bit as a self-defense guide for employees, because let's face it, there's a lot of bullshit, which is a fact, an acceptable term, it seems, in philosophy, and there's even a treaty on bullshit. um, so it is in fact intended to a large audience, everybody who is ever involved in HR, or the victim of HR, if I were to state it a little bit more bluntly.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose for those out there listening to this, obviously you came on and did a hosting HR Live with us back in the summer of last year, where we talked about some of the things that perhaps are in the book as well and that you've
Mhm.
talked about there. So really interesting. So I imagine at times you might not be everybody's favorite person in the profession, but I suppose for you it's all about trying to hopefully move the profession and HR professionals to do things in a way that will improve their practice, I assume.
Right, and I must say also that I'm joined in my plea that several philosophers also find using science is the only moral thing to do, because if you use just nonsense or bad models or outdated models which have been proven wrong, you can damage people. So the only moral thing to do is to base yourself on the best available evidence, and not use nonsense which could be damaging to people's self-image, to their that people start doubting themselves or making the wrong career decisions. But also they could get depressed by having taken a personality questionnaire which is totally wrong, and which paints a picture that is totally, devastating for their self-image. For example, I've seen people, their careers being destroyed by the wrong assessment measures, by personality questionnaires that are totally unacceptable, etc. So I've seen the damage. And you stated about my motivation. My motivation was also a little bit external, because we had this painful experience in our private lives and that my sister-in-law suffers from schizophrenia, was motivated by charlatans to abandon her regular medication and to take his back blossom therapy. So I've seen damage also in parallel words. I would say in the medical field there can be damage if nonsense are used, or charlatans and quacks are giving advice. And the same goes for HR, in fact. On the first side, maybe less damaging, but it can damage people's self-image and getting them into a depression and making wrong career decisions. So for me, it's the same moral quest, I would say. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You referred to the book as a dictionary.
Yeah.
So how did you go about writing the book then?
Well, my first book, which I published in Dutch, was already back in 2006, and I described 10 models or practices in HR that were wrong, like giving everybody an annual evaluation score. That was one of the 10. And I got criticized for only criticizing the things that were wrong, but not offering the right stuff. So I continued reading and evaluating new stuff. So I ended up with 55, and I tried to make an objective evaluation based on theory, based on empirical evidence. So, and that's why I ended up with 25 full-blown myths, 15 partial truths, and 15 provisionally good models and tools. So, and that's why I said, okay, it's more like a dictionary, because we have at least 55 entries within human resources. So, and I was also a little bit motivated by, because I'm a skeptic, I'm a member of the international skeptic community, and there is a skeptic dictionary. So I said, okay, let's make this an HR skeptic dictionary.
That makes sense. And it makes sense with the good, the bad, and the partially true, which obviously I know you have on there as well. So
yes, it refers to these 3 parts in my book. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. I know obviously when we've spoken before, you've talked about with your career, you're kind of at the stage where perhaps you're on the career trajectory and things like that. So I'm just wondering, is there any plans for any sort of future books from you, Patrick?
I have a plan for one future book, and it's about hypocrisy. Okay. There's a lot of hypocrisy in the world going on. I think we only need to refer to what is happening now in Ukraine and the misleading communication we have seen there. But hypocrisy is something which is interesting from a perspective of psychology as well. There have been books written about it, why we are hypocrites, etc. So I wanted to give some examples. So I'm now assembling examples of different fields, HR, but also beyond HR or management, and also to offer the scientific explanation for why this is.
Interesting, very interesting. Yeah. So we always end our HR book clubs with a recommendation. A lot of people find it very difficult to stick to one, but I'm going to ask you if possible, because I know we've talked before that you had more than one. So if there was one book that you would recommend to a HR professional, Patrick, which book would it be?
Well, then it's not an HR book, but it's sure about knowledge that every HR professional should have. And then I'm referring to Steven Pinker's Rationality. Steven Pinker is a Harvard professor, and now he has written a lot of books about human nature. But now he's written a book about rationality. And actually, every time I read a book from him, I thought, wow, this is great. You can never get with another book which is even better. And this book is even better. So it's a real good book about Bayesian reasoning, etc. And I think it's really worthwhile to read it, although it doesn't concern HR, but it offers such a good basis of rationality. And rationality is something we need in HR, and that's why we need to turn to science. And I think once you have discovered Steven Pinker, you will read a lot more about him. And as you know, maybe you don't know it, but he's also part of the club the founders of evolutionary psychology, together with John Tooby and Lida Cosmides. And this is really the basis for, this is the meta theory that psychology needs and needs to refer to more. So it's really worthwhile while reading it, as I've dedicated, no, not dedicated, as I've also written a very important chapter on the part which is good on evolutionary psychology. So there's the link, and I think it's really worthwhile reading that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us, and it's been a pleasure as always. And wish you every success with everything going forwards for you.
Thank you, Leon. All the success for you too.